How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 6 of What If Deku Had the Byakugan. And now, let's begin. Months have passed since Izuku encountered Stan, as him and his class were now on their way up into the mountains. Nezu had decided that they should get some extra training before their final exam. Once they would arrive at the training camp, they would all hop out of the bus as they would be then met by a group of 4 heroes, as they would immediately get them to work. The entire class would be forced to train hours upon hours, just going full out in the hopes of trying to get stronger, as they all heard how much harder this final exam was than the entrance exam and the midway exams. They had heard that it was thousands of times harder, and many people have actually gotten just failed by this and had to retake the grade or even falling out of the school entirely just because they failed the final exam. So many of them knew what was at stake and they trained their absolute hearts out. So when the end of the training camp came and it was the last day, they were all devoid of all energy. They had basically no energy left, having used it all to train, at the promise of getting thousands times stronger to take on the final exams. So when a villain attack had occurred, many of them had no energy to fight. However, they had to somehow just get back energy, as they needed to fight all these villains or be faced with death. It was quite the trade-off. You could either sit and relax your muscles, or you'd have to bring them and destroy them further than what they've already done, and just cause them to just be in pain if you somehow survive this villain attack. So what had happened was the entire class would be training, and up until the last day, they had gotten that off for training so hard. However, an attack had just decided to occur. Villains have decided to attack this training camp, getting word from an inside traitor, as Izuku and his class would end up seeing and smelling smoke coming above the tree line. As they would all look up, they would then see an explosion happen, and even more explosions. They would then be told that a villain was attacking them, as the Hirogiri would then just appear under them, spreading them out throughout the forest, much like it had done during the USJ. However, it was able to split aside 2 students, which happened to be the 2-star students of the entire just first year grade, as these students, of course, would be Izuku and Todoroki, as they would then be sent over to the League of Villains hideout, where they would then just be sat in chairs before being tied down. As Izuku and Todoroki would be sitting there, Shigaraki would be trying just to let them join him, explaining how much better it was to be a villain, how you could do whatever you want, and that they need to become villains or else they'll do something to them. As Izuku would then smile, as he would then just start laughing after smiling. Well, if you want to take my eyes, you're gonna have to kill me first. You can't take out my eyes before doing that. As Shigaraki would look right at Izuku before nodding his head. Well, I guess so. If you're wanting death, I can give it to you. But sadly, I can't do that until All For One says I can. But at least it'll be a painless death for you. Yeah, right. You're gonna be sitting through hours of torture for what you've done during the USJ. Suzuku would just smile towards Shigaraki, knowing that even if he were to die, his eyes and the Hyuga clan's just secrets about the Byakugan would be protected, as the seal remaining on his back was still intact. It had no way of being destroyed unless Izuku had came back to the clan and just wished for a death that wouldn't destroy his eyes, so that he could have somewhat of a funeral there. So Izuku would be sitting there as his entire class up in the mountains would be just being destroyed by all of these villains, as Koda, who was up in the mountains, would end up being killed by the villain Muscular. Many of these students, without the help of Todoroki and Izuku, would end up getting injured further. However, they were very lucky from from not being killed, as these villains were ordered to just get 2 students, and they were immediately gotten. So they basically just decided to have some fun. Some of them were captured as a result, while most of them rather, ended up getting away. Todoroki would be sitting there, as Izuku would then start to laugh even further. You really think that the heroes aren't gonna come and save us? Even then, you're still gonna have to kill me, and I know you'll be locked up in jail before then. So it's only a matter of time. Shigaraki would slap Izuku for speaking out, and that his annoying voice was hurting his head. As a week would end up passing, and we see the heroes, along with just the Momo, would be sitting in a conference room. So you're telling me you've had a tracking device? Yes, but it's been a week and they haven't gone to their final destination, as they've been moving for quite a while. However, I think they've gone to it, as in the past 2 hours it hasn't moved at all. All Might would look at the tracking device, as he would then tell Nezu to look up the location. And there the location was. It was a warehouse just on the outskirts of a massive city. All Might would nod before telling some of the heroes that they better go do this now and get it over with, as he would tell Nezu to evacuate the city and call for backup to head to those coordinates, as All Might would then start to jump off into that direction. Shigaraki would be seeing on the news how an evacuation notice had been issued, as he would then smile before raising up his hands. Ah, yes. The villain overlord is finally going to arrive. All for One's gonna save the day for us villains, killing All Might. The final battle's about to start. Almost instantly, however, there would be a knock on the door as All Might would bust through, as he would jump over, grabbing both Izuku and Todoroki, breaking them free of their restraints before pulling them back, handing them to the hero behind him, as they would then rush off. The wood hero standing next to him, I don't really want to pronounce the name because I pronounced it wrong in my past what ifs, so I'm just not going to say it, had spread out his cord, using it to capture many of the villains. However, a grayish goopy portal would end up opening up, and there stood All for One right before All Might. Congratulations, All Might. You managed to find my league's hideout. But it's a shame you're not going to be able to see them behind bars, as All for One would rush towards All Might before throwing a punch. As All Might would dodge this, he would then start to power up, going at his maximum plus ultra that he could, knowing that it's either live or die, and he'd rather sacrifice himself than sacrifice hundreds of other lives that may be in vain. So the final battle between All Might and All for One would then end up beginning. All Might launching himself towards All for One would easily All for One dodging this, as All Might would continue on just his crusade to trying to beat All for One. However, it was in complete vain. He was never going to be able to land a hit on All for One, who had recently got in a just dodging quirk that allowed him to dodge almost anything. So All Might was basically just doing this all for nothing, as the entirety of the world watching this from a news helicopter hovering above the fight would just be in shock. It looked like their number one hero, their star hero, their savior, was losing a battle. They've never seen something like this, and many of the civilians watching at home were starting to wonder, was All Might going to lose? Are the villains really going to win? And all of a sudden, All Might would then be hit right in his weak spot, as All for One would start to power up, launching All Might back into a building behind, sending the building toppling down, as All Might would barely be able to climb out of the rubble that was on top of him. All Might would barely look on towards All for One, as his gaze would end up blinking in and out, going from black to being able to see in and out. He was as if he was about to lose consciousness, and All Might knew if he did, he was most likely going to die, as he would start to fight to remain just alive, just sitting there, as Izuku would rush towards All for One before going for a punch. All for One would easily dodge this, as he would then start to laugh. Foolish boy, haven't you saw what your number one hero tried to do? He couldn't even hit me. Why do you think you could? Izuku would look on towards All For One before jumping right back at him, deciding not to give All For One just the ability to hear his voice. Suzuki rushing towards All For One, however, Izuku would peel off right in the last moment, as All For One not seeing Todoroki from behind him, as he would feel a cut go right through the bottom half of his body. There, Todoroki stood with his fire sword in hand, slicing right through All For One's body, falling down to the ground. All For One's main weakness was that he could never get a healing quirk, which was at the cost of getting so many other powerful quirks, and the dodging quirk could only go so far to what he could see, and with Todoroki out of his vision, he was easily able to slash right through the bottom half of All For One, as Izuku would look on towards All For One, as he would then ask All For One a question. Why? Why would you do this? Is it because the quirk let you into villainy? You could have went to UA or did something that could have gotten out of this hellhole the villain world is. Why did you choose to stay in it and become the overlord of it, to become the king of the villains? All For One would choose not to talk, much like Izuku had during their small fight, as All For One would then look up back at Izuku before telling him just to put him out of his misery. He was feeling immense pain, having his lower body just completely cut in half, as his organs had decided to somehow remain intact. As Izuku would decide to raise his sword that he had just gotten out of nowhere, deciding that it would be best to raise it as he would be coming closer to All For One, just in case All For One tried to pull something. Izuku would get close, raising his sword, would go down, but would stop his sword midway, deciding it wasn't worth taking a life. Even though All For One took many lives, he has no right to take someone else's life. As he would then see authorities or police rush over to All For One, handcuffing him before putting him in the back of an ambulance, as they would then rush off to a hospital. Months later, Izuku would have passed his final exam, All Might would have retired, and All For One would be in a maximum security prison, being tied down. Even though he had no legs, they didn't know what other quirks he had, as he remained silent, and he would only speak to Izuku, Todoroki, and even All Might. So Izuku would pass through UA, as he would then end up becoming a number one hero, as his family in the Hyuga clan would end up watching and just being proud of Izuku, as there stood one of their members sitting at the top of the hero world, helping hundreds of people every single day. However, Izuku had a power lingering dormant that wouldn't end up happening, or just exploding out until he would end up turning 20. However, that would be later on in his life, and he had no worries right now, as Izuku was 19, and he was the number one hero already. He was at the top of the world. And that's where this what if ends. I'm going to leave whatever happens up to your speculation, and just whatever you guys want to happen, whether Izuku ends up fighting Overhaul with Kurama, I'm gonna say Kurama. If Izuku fights Overhaul with the Nine-Tails Fox and ends up completely destroying Overhaul, or if Izuku ends up getting a family with the ship of your choosing, I don't want to decide that, because some of you guys will get mad if I do something that you guys don't like, mostly ships. So, yeah, that's where this what if ends, everyone. I thank you all for watching this series. Saturday and Sunday is going to be a new series. I hope you all do enjoy that series. And tomorrow, since there's not going to be a part 7 of this series, I'm not quite sure what will come out. Possibly something that has to do with my community tab post, but I'm not quite sure yet. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.